What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Unreal Engine Twitch live stream.
Hey guys,
I've missed you. Alex has been filling in, but he couldn't be here, so you have to deal with me this time.
I was super happy I get the honorable chance
I
here
know.
with that. Look, yeah, I missed you, man.
It's
I
kind of like
missed you.
it's kind of like the olden days too. So we got Shelly back as well.
Yeah.
So woo!
This is the canonical team.
Not
for,
that I know it's not that we don't love Clint and Alex. They're awesome and stuff, and they're certainly missed, but they are traveling the globe. So it's good to see you all. We got a lot of exciting news to talk about with 414.
Yep, 414.
It's right around the corner. Of course, everybody's, well, at least my favorite technical director,
Oh.
Mike Fricker here. Don't tell the others.
Mm.
We've got some cool news to share, and we hope you enjoy. So let's dive right in, Shelly. With the transitions, I've been closed into a computer. All right, so as mentioned, we're covering 414 today, and Preview 2 is actually available now. So Preview 1 came out last week, or a couple weeks back. We've been compiling notes and getting ready for the full release, and so we got a lot of good feedback from there, and there's a ton of fixes in Preview 2. So you can head over to the forums right now. There's a really great post on it in the announcements and releases section. Stephen Ellis has got this wonderful post of all these fixes. I mean, this is just a ton in this one. So yeah, go check it out. You know, it's not for production release yet. We'll get there, but if you want to see if your project works, poke around on some of the new features we're talking about today. Just feel free to download it from the launcher and check it out. And
Always make a copy of your project
Yes.
before you switch to a preview release.
yes,
This
absolutely.
is good practice.
And another thing too, I'm gonna fix my microphone here. I came in a little late. Sorry.
I guess
Shelley.
while we're talking about 414 right here, I want to mention a little bit about the release process for this one, since it's a little bit of a shorter,
Oh, okay.
a little bit shorter
Yeah,
of a
sure.
schedule, and we changed something with this one where usually we go and do a lot of debugging after we branch for release. So the first preview is a little bit, it can be a little bit rough sometimes,
Right.
because we plan to fix high priority bugs in the branch after we release and right before we go preview. So this time we did a little differently, where we put the burden on the team to fix more bugs, many more bugs, before we even branched for preview,
Oh, wow.
hoping that the first preview would be noticeably more stable and noticeably more usable for early adopters right out of the gate. So that's something we tried for this release. Feedback would be useful, but it was a little bit shorter of a dev cycle too, so that might help with that too.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's great. So yeah, there's a ton in this one as well. Feel free to drag it down and check it out. And remember, if you've got any bugs to report, you can just shoot them up to the Answer Hub so we can make sure we're aware of them and try to get them in the final. Cool. Next up, so if you missed last week, we announced the 2016 winners of the Epic Mega Jam. We had over 190 teams participated, over 430 developers. There's some really great prizes. Falcon had donated a tiki right here, which is pretty awesome. Check this out, Mike. I don't know if you've seen this.
I skimmed through. I've seen the blog post.
Boom.
Oh, awesome!
How
yeah.
awesome is that, right? Like, I want that PC.
No, I haven't
Like,
seen that.
It's really awesome. So anyway, congratulations to all the teams, and another huge shout out to all of our sponsors, SpeedTree, Intel, of course, as always. Side Effects is, been sponsoring the jams for quite some time. Algorithmic from last year as well. So thank you all for everything. Thank you for participating. Look forward to having another one next year. Hopefully, we'll continue with our monthlies as well.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Oh, no, I closed something too early. What have I done? Oh no, I closed all of it.
You can close the community tab.
Yeah, let me see if I can bring that back.
Right-click reopen tab.
Can I do that? Right click and reopen.
Click it again. Oh no.
Oh no. Anyway, I can pull up my notes up over here. We can go from there. Da, da, da.
While he's doing that, I'll just get back to. So I want to mention the next release, 415. It's going to be. I guess we've been doing this. We did this last year too, where we kind of shorten the cycle again and focus on stability. So kind of we have one release per year that's kind of extra stable that we do before the end of year. So that's planned to be the 415 release. So again, it'll be a little bit shorter dev cycle. There's still tons of awesome features in it, but we'll be focusing on fixes and wow, you're fast. You should see how fast you open 1 million tabs.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I mean, you should see how fast I closed them all. All right, I think.
So next release, a little bit shorter dev cycle, more stability.
Did it just close altogether? Shelly, are you punking us? All right. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, Chrome crashed on us. There we go. Restore those tabs, please. Oh, I actually want to do that. But I can apparently work on voting in North Carolina. Thanks, Chrome. Anyway, continue, Mike. Apologies.
Yeah, so 415, stability. And then back after this release, we'll get back to kind of the longer, more crazy releases. that's kind of our schedule right now, where we generally have the 3 really big releases per year, and quarterly we'll have a stability-focused release that still has a lot of big stuff in it, but we kind of shorten the schedule a little bit there and focus on fixes more than new features.
Cool. I'm having to MFA into this thing.
I'll mention too, as I usually do before we talk about new stuff in 4.14, just all of the thank yous to the community for submitting features, submitting pull requests for fixes. We got, gosh, I don't know the full count, but it's approaching, I think, 75 community accepted pull requests from GitHub that made it into the 4.14 release.
That's great.
It might be higher than that by the time we're done, but thank you so much, as usual, for doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you all help make Unreal Engine awesome, right? Like,
Totally.
there's so many things that people are using the toolkit for so many different things now, right? Like, and there are new things that need to be added by those people that are building, non-traditional, not things we wouldn't necessarily even take into a workflow, right?
That's the thing. There's a lot of pull requests up there. There's more than we can, we can reasonably review and commit. But we really want to make it easy for you guys to find awesome things that the community members have done that might not necessarily make sense to be like in our version of UE4 that Epic supports, but we want to make sure they're discoverable. We have a nice wiki page for that right now. Also, and it's something that we want to keep looking at, kind of ways to improve the code community for UE4 in the future.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so apologize for my rusty hands and working the magic on the screen, but we can hop back over. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Always covering me. All right, another Game Jam news. The UE4 Jam for November has been announced. We're going to kick it off next week. A little bit of delay in getting this one posted up here, so I apologize for that. It's a little bit short notice, but it ought to be awesome. The post is up on the forums. You can head over to events and check out when it is. It's going to go through the 10th to the 13th of next week, and then we'll probably judge them the first week of December, mostly because we've got the holidays coming around. I know a number of the Epic staff are not going to be here, and we assume potentially some of you might be out as well. All right, so this went out last week as well, but it wasn't over to the blog, so I want to call it out, make sure that you guys got to check it out. But we had another announcement of Unreal Dev Grants went out, so you can head over to the blog now and check out these amazing projects. There's Alice VR by Carbon Studio, Canarium by Zoetrope Interactive. There is the Fantastic Voyages of Teo and Leon, I believe, by Kenzen Studios. It's like a really cool. It's like a television IP. Like they're building like a fully interactive digital IP, and there's a really awesome VR aspect to it that they've been working on. The Watchmaker by Micropsia Games. We've had them on here at the Community Spotlight in the past. Really great game out of South America. Lost Soul Aside by Bing Yang, the single developer in Korea that's making the
awesome, like Devil May Cry style, like super cool fighting game.
It's just super awesome. He actually went and visited Ray Park in
no way.
in our Korean office and stuff. They got to hang out and stuff, and then he went back to China where he's now hanging out with Wu Hao. So
nice.
Excellent projects. And then the last one here is the Dice's Cast. It's a mobile ARPG from Studio Next Stage in Korea as well. So congratulations to all the Dev Grants recipients. We're going to have more news on that very soon.
I'm always impressed by the super small teams that can create something, get to this point where it's demonstrable.
Totally.
Like that inspires me so much because that's what I want to do, and I know you do this too.
Oh, totally.
You're on the weekend, you want to crank out some game too and exercise some idea you have.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them too. Like these, you hear the stories, you talk to the developers and stuff. They're like 2-3 people that are working in blueprints. Maybe one knows a little bit of code. And it's the technical barriers are removed for a lot of these teams, right? And it really shows in their work. It's awesome. So really quick before we hop over to Indie Mega Booth, I mean, we're kind of showing it to you here, but I wanted to say for Dev Grants, if you want to apply for Unreal Dev Grants, we've still got a few of the Vives left over from the Valve allotment that we partner with them on getting Vives into the hands of developers. So let us know. You can head over to unrealengine.com/unrealdevgrants, and there's a form on there you can fill out. Same thing for the regular Dev Grants program. People ask me all the time, is it still going? Is it still running? Absolutely, and for the foreseeable future. So check it out. Cool. Indie Mega Booth. So we partner with Indie Mega Booth every year to, we have in the last, I guess, a couple events to help sponsor some space in the Indie Mega Booth. And their submissions are open for, I believe, both PAX East and GDC. So if you're looking to have a game ready to show at that time, this is a great way to get your game in front of a whole lot of people. And we encourage you to go submit if you can. They're an awesome program. They're a wonderful partner of ours. We really love the work that they do.
Cool.
All right, this one up earlier today or yesterday. It says November 1st, so October 2016 marketplace update. There is a ton of new stuff coming to the marketplace. We've seen over the last, I guess, few months, we've started to do these monthly roll-ups. Way back in the day, we did weekly, and now there's so much every single week. We decided to roll them all up into a month. But if you're looking for anything in particular, I don't know the exact number in here, but there is just a ton of new content on the marketplace. So if you've been waiting out for something in particular, check this out and see if it's up there, and check out the rest of the exciting wares that are available for purchase now. Roll all the way back
Or
up.
create something. and
Yeah,
publish it.
make something. Make something and bother Stephanie. All right, so I'm sure you've heard about Robo Recall. It's this new game thing that we've worked on.
this little
in the
thing.
past. Yeah, it's super awesome. We're super excited about the game.
It's
you know.
so fun. It's
It-
like it's so fun. I
Yeah,
love it.
we had a wonderful showing at Oculus Connect. You know, lots of great feedback there. The game is playable at Vertigo 2016, and I believe this is the first time in Europe that it's gonna. Yeah. Be one of the first people in Europe to actually check it out. So we're gonna have it there next week. So if you're in the area, strongly suggest that you swing by. I encourage you to come play the game. It is freaking awesome. I am so excited.
It makes you feel like you're in a movie. You're the star of some action movie, and you're just doing things that you've seen on TV,
Yeah.
and they work.
Yeah.
Like they just work.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah,
crazy.
It's a lot of fun. So check it out, or fly there and do it, which I could do. And then I know there's a lot of news here, so I apologize. We want to get to the meat of the conversation, of course.
Tons
but,
of cool features to show.
Yeah, EGX Res. So we partner with them for Res 2017. There's kind of a newer exhibition space called the Powered by Unreal Zone. So you can apply for that space. It's kind of first come, first serve. It's quite a bit cheaper than actually getting a regular space at Res, and the booth size is about twice as big too. So if you're looking at Res, if you're going to have a game again that's ready to show around that time frame, that's going to be March 30th to April 1st at London's Tobacco Dock. Highly encourage you to hop on this if you're building an awesome UV4 game, and we hope to see you there. And then MIGS is next week. So we've done MIGS pretty much every year. We've had some level of involvement there, and this is up in Montreal. I've kind of been all over the map now with the news. We're kind of in a number of different places here, but MIGS 2016, we've got a couple of sessions that we're hosting on Unreal Engine 101. If you're just getting started, go check out Louis Cataldi's talk up there. It's going to be on the 14th from the 2:15 to 3:15, and then again from 3:45 to 4:45, and then Max Pressner, Gearky Max, and Zach Parrish, everyone's favorite pink-headed DevRel tech artist.
That'll be a good one.
Are going to show how to integrate some third-party SDKs. We're actually going to use the Logitech, the backlit keyboards, whatever their the Illumination SDK. So we can integrate that live and show people kind of how that all works. So that'll be really cool. You can find out more information on the MIGS website. All the information is right here on the blog. You can check out unrealengine.com/blog for all of this. The Vertigo and the Res ones are at unrealengine.com/news, which you won't find in the header here. You have to roll down to the bottom and click this, or just type it into your address bar and check it out there.
Nice.
And then I believe the last piece of news before we move on, I know a couple months back we had announced and then kicked off, and then now we have the results of the VR Funhouse Game Jam that we hosted out on a docked ship in the harbor
So awesome.
in Hamburg, the MS Fliegen. So it was a lot of fun. We partnered with NVIDIA and Valve and HTC to make something really awesome happen out there. We brought in 7 capable VR teams from the area in Germany, Spain, the Amsterdam, the Netherlands area, and so we finally have all the games listed up here. There's a really great video that Jess put together, and then there's this is a video that NVIDIA put together that has interviews with some of the teams, and Jess wrote the blog, so that's why I confused there. But you can check out the individual teams that were up there, find out who they are, find out what they made, and a couple of these are available to download in Steam Workshop. So if you've got Funhouse, you can play some of the things that were made there, and you might recognize some of these faces like Jan and Exy, a couple of you guys that are probably in the chat right now that I'll have to check here in a second to see, and then a few others as well. So. Great work, everybody. We are so stoked with the event. Look at this venue. Like this is inside a ship. It's
So
just all
awesome.
wood. Yeah, I wish I could have gone. I was very envious of everybody that was there. But anyway, thanks to all our sponsors again there, and thanks for all the participants, everybody that came out on the public day to play all the games. It was super rad.
Yeah,
Back to the blank screen, and then so the next thing I have in my notes is just says 414. That's the only note
What about
I've
it
got.
though?
Yeah, I don't know. I was hoping you had something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Let's
maybe.
find the slides.
Cool. Yeah, remember when I closed everything earlier?
Yeah. What?
No, don't worry. We'll get it back up here.
Catastrophic
It is.
browser failure on the
I
stream.
know. So I can't spell anything from here. The greatest thing is, you know, you shared these with me, and then I was like, I'll get it all ready. Don't worry. And then here I go, just crushing everything. This is the one, right?
That's the one. Yeah.
And you've got your notes over there now. Cool. You want me to present this thing? Where's the little play button?
Top right.
Ah, there we go. Great. All right. Did you want to drive this as well, or?
Yeah, I can actually. If you're gonna do chat,
Yeah, sure.
that's fine.
Never mind me. I'll just awkwardly look over at my computer. Oh, look at those lights.
I'll just find like a good layout here. All right, guys. So 414, new stuff. Forgive me, I just put this together like super quick. We're working on the release notes still. So as usual, the pictures are perhaps temporary. We might have better descriptions of things in the full release notes. Team's still working hard on them. Usual disclaimer. So I don't know if you know how this works, but I'll just generally run through kind of the highlights of the 414 release. Not all of them. I can't go through all of them. There's some that I don't even know how work yet because I haven't tried them. And there's some that we just haven't properly documented yet because they're coming in so hot. But I'll get the big ones for sure. And then if you have questions, either put them in the chat, and maybe we'll pick them. Like we can do questions live as we go through sometimes if you see a good one chance, or at the end. I always have time for Q&A as long as these guys will keep me here. And
As long as Shelly doesn't kick us out.
yeah, as long as you don't get kicked out, I'll answer questions, or Chance can answer questions, and we'll just go from there. All right. So to start off with, we've added support for the upcoming version of Visual Studio. Currently codenamed Visual Studio 15. It's not 2015. That's the version we're already using.
Is this like Madden 25?
It's
they did that whole thing.
They've always been on incrementing number system. It's just this is the first time I think the release lined up with the actual. Anyways, the next year's release lines up with this year's number. Anyway, so the cool thing is here you don't have to switch right away or anything. We figured it a way working with Microsoft. We can support both compilers at the same time with the same set of static libraries and third-party libraries. You can actually just choose in the options. There's a little picture down here. In the editor preferences, under source code editor, you can choose which IDE you'd like to use. I know it shows like older IDEs here too, but and you can of course use those IDEs if you want for typing code, but for compilers we support 2015 and Visual Studio 15, and that's pretty much it.
Cool.
So that's coming. This is a cool feature that I've been really excited about. We've actually been talking about this for a while now, but basically we have support for automatically generated static mesh LODs. This is a feature that we've had support for these types of plugins in the engine for a while now, maybe upwards of a year. But this is kind of our built-in version. But previously, you'd either have to have a license for Simplygon or some third-party system for generating LEDs automatically. So this is a built-in version. Results may vary, but we're pretty happy with the results.
Yeah, this looks great. Like watching even like at the lower try count, right? Like.
Yeah, I have another picture here too I can show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does a good job. So it doesn't replace all of the features that we have in the engine for automatic LED generation. For example, it doesn't work with proxy LED generation yet. That's the system that you use for hierarchical LED for a whole level. And it doesn't work with skeletal meshes yet, I'm pretty sure. But it does work great for static meshes, and you'll all just get this benefit automatically. There's some new settings that you can look at. There's this new LED group system. So in your config files for your project, you can add a number of LED groups. And the LED groups kind of specify the rules for target triangle count and whatnot. And you can see that in the picture kind of on the left here. But generally, the way it works is it's a quadratic mesh simplification where we set a triangle count, and then the algorithm goes through and looks for pairs of vertices to collapse. So it looks for edges in the model and tries to figure out which edges, when collapsed, will make the least possible visual difference to the model. And then it finds a spot to put the new vertex after it's collapsed, and it just keeps doing that, deleting triangles until it gets to the polygon count you want. So it works pretty good. It's a reasonably simple kind of system, but it took us a while to make like a really nice, robust one. So thank you, Brian Karras, for working on that. That was awesome. It does retain your UVs, normals, and tangents, including your lightmap UVs. So the cool thing here too is that you can generate lightmaps for your highest level, highest resolution mesh, and use those lightmaps for all the resolution static meshes in your level. Everything's preserved. And there's one kind of bonus feature too that there'll be more information about in the release notes, and that's that because the system kind of evaluates the optimal way to collapse vertices and edges retain the most possible visual quality. There's a checkbox in the UI that I think it's called, it's shown right here, auto compute LOD distances. And what that will do is it will set up distances for this LOD in the static mesh editor that will result in hopefully like the highest quality preservation of detail with distance to the camera. Whereas something normally you'd kind of like guessestimate, right? You just like a human would just be like, looks still kind of good. So this will help you with that.
Test every single one to make sure that it actually does what you want. In other scenarios where this just kind of handles it for you.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So this is just built in 4.14. You can just kind of turn it on, use it to generate LODs. Cool.
That's great.
Next one. This is called static lighting scenarios, and I have a picture in a second, but I just want to explain it for a second. So the idea here is that if you have a game that has multiple kind of lighting conditions for a statically lit environment, say daytime and nighttime is the most common one, or dusk and dawn, and you're generating light maps, this lets you generate multiple sets of light maps for a single kind of environment with different lights and different combinations of shadowed objects used in each case. But the way that it works is that you'll use the sublevel system, and you'll take like lights that you want for daytime and put them in a sublevel in your map, and then you'll take like nighttime, like street lamps or something, put those in
a different
sublevel. You can put other objects in there too if you want, and then you can kind of right-click on the light and change it to. I'm moving the mouse here, but change it to a scenario level, and that lets the light mass ray tracer know, okay, this is going to need its own separate lighting bake. And I'll mention too, it's right here at the bottom, that this is another big kind of cool change in 4.14 is that all the built lighting data for your level now actually gets saved to a separate asset file alongside your map. And I know at first it might seem like, oh, great, another file to go with my map, more housekeeping, but this actually has really nice advantages. Besides the fact that you could have multiple built lighting data now, you can also make changes to your map and rebuild lighting without the other person necessarily having access to the file. So it's an exclusive access.
Well, at the same time too, I think if you get a good light bake, you could actually just like source control that thing, try some other stuff.
You could,
and then come back and say revert to this old setting.
Yeah, you could as long as the map is still compatible.
Instead of having to change your actual map and other things you may have changed in there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
So this is kind of an example of how it looks using, I think, the Showdown content or one of our VR demos. And here's kind of a daytime version. And I'll just kind of pop back and forth between day and night.
That's nice.
So they're both fully pre-computed, but you can see the lamps only exist. They're only turned on in the nighttime one. And the sunlight and skylight, is only on in the daytime one.
Now, can you, in those sublevels, just from my own curiosity, can you take that scenario information and run extra logic on it based on which was passed on that load?
Oh yeah. So, well, you mean can you conditionally like select which one to use based off something else?
So I'm saying like here, event begin place, load stream a level, say I load stream day.
Yep.
And then inside day knows, okay, great. Now that it's day, I want to activate these other things. Like that sign doesn't need to be shown in neon during closed hours.
I'm pretty sure you can. I'm pretty sure, like,
cool.
In general, it's just a normal sublevel, except those hints to light mass baker to also like this lighting goes with you. So I don't know if we've tried that, or I haven't heard from people trying, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
But yeah, so since you're passing a variable here, I assume that the level can know, okay, I've received some information.
Yeah.
Now I can do something with that, right?
Yep. It's definitely like a normal sublevel.
It's great.
Cool. So next we have some skin shading stuff. Okay.
This guy.
This might be hard. It might not come through on stream very well. So I have like another picture that shows the detail, but we've basically changed the skin rendering algorithm. This is the algorithm that kicks in if you have a material and you change it to subsurface profile in your material, which enables this kind of, well, in 4.13, by default, it enables this kind of checkerboard effect where your specular detail would go in one component and the diffuse in the other, and it kind of checkerboarded and then did a full screen pass to blend it all together, which resulted in an image this image on the left here. So in 4.14, we've made it full resolution, so it doesn't have to do this checkerboard kind of trick anymore. So that gets you greater detail up close. You can see kind of like the wrinkles here, the eye. There's detail lost over here that you can now see. And the example here might be kind of subtle, but with specular and extreme lighting, like you really do notice the lack of detail. So I think this should kind of automatically make a nice bit of difference for skin shaders. I might as well also mention too, like old algorithm, the checkerboard system, was good for smooth surfaces anyway. Like it's fine. It was perfectly acceptable for smooth surfaces. It's really just where you have like that kind of fine grained detail. You need that extra resolution.
Yeah.
And then finally, like the performance should be about the same as before, and it's enabled by default, but it does require 64-bit render targets, or frame buffer, which is the default in UE4, the float RGBA. So it's really only a performance issue or an issue for you if you can't use that 64-bit format for whatever reason because you need the performance, and then it will automatically fall back to the
drops back.
Yeah,
That's great.
the old method. Cool. So this one's kind of interesting one. So
Globs.
yeah, I know the pictures. When I first saw the pictures for this one, I was like, oh my gosh, what the like? I just didn't understand it for a second. But it took a little second to explain. But it's really actually simple when you kind of understand what we're doing here. So previously, if you use reflection environments alongside planar reflections and screen space reflections, there's this interesting like visual transition that has to happen between the two, where we're drawing reflections for two separate things, and we kind of blend them together, but they don't line up visually on the screen. And it's because like when a surface is almost a mirror or close to roughness, like the roughness is less than 0.3, it's the screen space reflection or planar reflection is very obvious.
Right.
It's very and it doesn't always match up with the reflection capture generated
in the scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, reflection captures are generated from fixed points that kind of you place them manually, or so they can't. We do a parallax trick, but they can't always line up perfectly. So you can see some discontinuity, and like here's kind of an example of kind of the artifacts you'll see, like where the reflection down here kind of bleeds over, and they just don't match up. So we've changed it now, so the way that we mix planar and screen space reflections with the static reflection captures, we basically stop mixing now when things get as shiny as like when the roughness is less than 0.3, we blend the mixing off until it gets down to 0.1. So a perfectly mirrored surface, we just don't mix anymore. And the nice thing is going back and forth, you can see just much fewer artifacts. Again, this is an extreme example. These are perfectly mirrored kind of surfaces. So in a typical scene that has a textured environment with lighting and all, it's going to be more subtle difference here, but it just overall results in just higher quality looking reflections and less kind of weird artifacts with screen space. Because you remember with screen space reflections, you can see as the camera moves, things change, and also the parallax from the reflection captures will move at the same time in camera space, and if they don't line up, the discontinuity is distracting. But that's kind of the difference there. Cool. So it's just kind of an automatic benefit in this next release. Next one's just a cool tools feature we added, where you can just kind of select stuff. Here's a screenshot or animation from Paragon, where we just like selected a bunch of actors in the level, and you can just right click and say, take all these things and just make a static mesh out of them. So it's like your ultimate easy statue builder, I guess.
This is awesome.
But you can do with skeletal meshes or whatever. So anything that's like we can kind of grab the verts from and put it into a mesh will do that, and it'll keep the materials and textures and everything. It's like just, hey, I've arranged this stuff. Let me make a nice statue.
What does it do as far as like I was watching this earlier, like we were talking about, these are all skeletals, they have all their own materials and everything. It's all built as is. Does it make new assets, or
it makes a new asset?
Okay, great.
Yep.
You
can see in the example he's choosing kind of like a folder and a file name for the new static mesh.
Perfect.
It just makes a static mesh.
Okay.
Copies over whatever it can. It should be pretty faithful.
Cool.
But the nice thing here is you can actually pose the characters before you do it.
And then shoot them out, right?
Yeah. So you can assign an animation and pose them in a kind of nice way, and then just make a statue.
Think about how I would use this.
It's kind of fun.
It'd be awesome.
So it's a fun tool. Next thing we got for you is support for NVIDIA Ansel,
which is cool.
If you guys don't know about this is like a cool, like almost like a digital photography system, but in Engine, where you can kind of do creative stuff in any video game that supports this. I think you need like to be whitelisted by NVIDIA to support, but I don't think it's too hard to get that. So this will let you basically, like, it adds some features to Unreal where you can take your player camera manager and kind of tweak some settings to make the experience good for this kind of photographer using this feature in your game.
Right.
For example, like you might want to change the distances that things are visible at. You might want to hide and show UI or tweak the post-process when they're using this mode, or expose ways that they can tweak post-process in the UI. So it adds some features there. I think the plugin's disabled by default, so you can find it in the plugin manager and turn it on for your product if you want it in your game. And I also want to throw a thanks to Adam Moss at NVIDIA, who wrote this feature and submitted it to us. Thanks, man.
Yeah, and I think that if you want more information on that, NVIDIA's got a lot of videos that they've shown. They had it, I think, at the DreamHack keynote, so they showed off Ansel using a couple different games and how people were able to, in the actual runtime game, being able to stop and then take a camera and then look in a scene, right?
It's
Like,
really
which
cool.
is
Yeah.
not-
Yeah. There's another picture here is showing like this is the end result. You
Yeah.
can kind of make like a 360 video. This is in a browser that I just screen capped.
Yeah, but this isn't in, like, this wouldn't necessarily be in editor, but in the actual final game.
That's right, the
Yeah,
final game.
which is awesome.
Yeah. So this is just me playing the Subway demo as a game, and then bring up Ansel, capture a 360 screenshot, and then it gets pasted to like this in this case it was like Google Cloud or something was pasted
Yeah.
at.
But
and then
it's
anyone
super
could do
cool,
it.
man.
Should be fun. We're definitely like on the verge of seeing a whole lot more creative in-game screenshots with this stuff.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Because not every game can afford to add like a custom photo making mode, and this will just accelerate that. So this is kind of a fun one. I think I put it here just because like I mean, relatively minor improvements here. But so we had capsule or a cable component before, which is like your kind of like super cool rope maker tool, rope making component in UE4. But the framework team has added some features to it that just make it like super juicy and fun now. Like there's collision now, which it didn't have collision before, so there's simple collision. It's support for dangling, so you can take either end of the cable and just say like, yeah, you're not bound to anything. You're just gonna like kind of go free.
Can you take the middle of it? Can you, like,
No, well, the middle's like grab the middle.
yeah, could I pick it? Could I pick that up like a piece of ramen with my chopsticks?
I don't think so. I'm gonna say I don't think so. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure we don't have that yet. But that would be
I
funny.
hope James is watching because he knows what I want now.
That's like full on soft putty.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's stiffness settings now, so you can control how bendy your cable is, and then finally there's sockets on either end. So in the example video, you can see the kind of fire hose effect of mutagen stuff, and that's just like a socket with a particle system attached. So kind of a fun thing.
In my games that I'm carrying a hose around that's spewing out blue liquids, this is gonna make a lot of things. This is really cool.
It's fun. Here's another little one that a lot of people have been asking for this feature, and I'm glad that I think Matt Kohlenschmidt implemented this rather quickly. But basically, support for outline fonts in the engine, which we never really had. There's just tricks you could do, but this is like proper outline with you can set up materials to set up whatever kind of gradient or effect that you want on. These are a little gratuitous, admittedly. He would admit that, but
I mean, like, this reminds me of the old early AOL days, with, like,
it's like GeoCities web pages.
Yeah.
So it's just an extreme example to show what's possible.
Can you add this to any of the fonts you've got loaded up in your game? I
Yep.
assume this.
Any widget that has any Slate or UMG widget that has a font, you can go and hook this up.
I'd have to chat with the team, but I assume that this is what we're using to do the outline on the Robo Recall, like the
Oh yeah, maybe.
the over
maybe.
over character stuff.
I know on VR Editor we just switched to using this for some of the UI menus because they're overlaid on the world, right? Like just in 3D, and having an outline there just really makes it pop.
Huge, right?
But we're not doing the rainbow thing.
Why not? It's beautiful.
Okay, next one is another highly requested feature. It's not much to show here, but it's awesome in that you can take set properties or map properties that are exposed as U properties, and now they're editable in the editor if they're marked as editable. So on the left here is like a set, and you can see like it has 6 elements. So this is kind of like editing an array, right? If you're editing an array of elements, but a set is cool. Everything's guaranteed to be unique in a set. The order isn't determinate, so the order doesn't really matter with these guys. It's not guaranteed to ever stay the same, but it's guaranteed that everything's unique, and a set has awesome properties in that they're super fast to look up into. This is why programmers want to use these in their games all the time.
It's like almost like an enum of some sorts, or
yeah. It's not an enum. It's a list of things, but the list. You don't care about the order, you just care whether something's in the list.
Oh, okay,
that's the use case for it, which is wonderful because it's almost free to look up and find something in there, where if you had a straight up list, depending on the length of it, we have to search.
Yeah, just to find it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So maps is similar. This is comparable to, in like C#, it's called this dictionary. We call them maps, and that's the C++ kind of way. But so it's similar to set in that everything's unique in here. All the keys are unique. So now there's 2 columns of items. The first one's the key. That has its own type separate from the value. So in this case, it's a mapping of names of things to their color. And again, like any game in Unreal probably has a few tmap properties already. We've supported tmap serialization for quite a few releases now. So now this just gives you a way that you can expose them and have people tweak them in the editor or blueprints or whatever.
That's great.
Yep, it's going to be really useful. I know that they definitely have a little bit strange characteristics compared to Lisp, but the performance benefits are so awesome for these guys because they're both like order 1 access to look things up. So programmers are going to really like using these, and hopefully it's it's fairly straightforward for designers to work with them too. All right, next one is a graphics view one with materials. So this is kind of cool. We've been adding we've actually been improving kind of features for procedurally generating textures and kind of noise functions the last 2 releases. Like last time we added Voronoi noise in 2D in the material editor using the noise node. So this one adds like a lot more kind of utility functions for doing even crazier things with noise. This gets a little heavy on the math, so I won't go too much into that. But we do have like kind of these new types of noise functions that are based in 3D. You can use them in 4D too. They're basically just vectors, but so this lets you do kind of like, you know, if you're using it procedurally on a surface, it would give you a varying texture with depth, not just on the outside of the surface.
Okay,
So if you're able to
right,
push into it or carve out of it, you'd see different stuff than on the outside. So it's like a 3D texture generation.
That is bizarre.
So the different types, we have cell noise. Cell noise basically takes your 3D, chops it up into a grid and lets you give a different value per grid, or randomly generates a color per grid cell. So again, as you carved in, you see different colors. Vector noise it's basically just generating different noise on a vector by taking kind of the minimum distance to a random point and then creating color from that. The gradient one is like a Perlin noise, where it takes RGB, puts that in, it takes the gradient, puts that in the RGB, and takes the scalar noise and puts that in the alpha. So this ends up like really good for bumps. It's kind of like your go-to for bump mapping kind of stuff. Curl is interesting. Curl's supposedly good for fluids. It's a Perlin curl, so it basically takes the curl vector of a Perlin noise sample, outputs a signed vector between -1 and 1 normalized, and gives you something that you can obviously animate all of these too, right? And make interesting kind of animations. And finally, the Voronoi one, we had this in 2D before. Here's the 3D kind of counterpart. Again, it does Voronoi, generates 3 Voronoi samples and then randomly, and then finds the closest distance to the nearest one every pixel, and that gives you a color. So it ends up just kind of this 3D kind of Voronoi that you can kind of cut through.
Crazy.
I'll mention too, these aren't particularly designed for like real time. They're real time kind of for generating textures, but we use these for is to, we'll have artists use these features in their materials, and they'll use the draw material to render target feature that we introduced, I think, 4.13. And they'll bake these down to a texture and just use a texture in the game. Or a flip of textures or
It's
something.
like a content creation path.
It's a
right?
content creation tool. Yeah, that's the way we look at it. You can use them in game, of course, if you want, but some of these can be rather heavy on math, and you'll run into like crazy amounts of instructions. The cell noise one is the exception. The cell noise one is super fast, so you can just use that wherever.
Oh, actually, I got a question here that's not too far behind us.
Sure.
For the sets and maps you had earlier.
yeah.
Like are there blueprints nodes for those, or?
They're blueprint types. So and we already had this in Vim 4.13. So when you're creating a new variable type,
You can just set up as a new.
instead of an array, you could choose like a mapper set.
Okay, great, awesome.
Yeah.
So that would be accessible by anything in blueprints as necessary. Look up or get it set, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right. And you get those same performance benefits even in Blueprint if you need to look up something super quick.
Yeah.
From So
Awesome.
there'll be more information in the release notes.
Cool.
Next one. I was able to get a screenshot or a GIF from RoboRecall development for this one. It's kind of fun. But basically, we switched to PhysX 3.4, and we've been working with NVIDIA to get features that are really cool. One of the ones that we're showing here is continuous collision detection. We already had continuous collision detection, but this is specifically continuous collision detection on a kinematic object, so on a rigid body, which, like in this example, the gun is. So continuous collision detection, if you don't know, basically it's almost like, think of it as kind of bulletproof collision detection. It's a perfect example for this because he's swatting a bullet in RoboRecall. But it basically, if 2 objects are moving towards each other very quickly,
There might be a frame where they're past
exactly,
each other.
we updated a specific time step, so maybe we didn't get the in-between, and it just went right through it. So continuous, kind of like, if you can imagine it kind of extending what's going to happen over time and doing a collision on that result of that extended object and figuring out the intersection. So having that for just regular kinematic objects is nice. Before, you can only use it with certain shapes.
Yeah, so I interrupted you there just to kind of like reiterate, like that will also change based on what your frame rate is, right? Like, so where things are updating, like before this, like without continuous, you might have two things that are coming at each other, and then
It could, yeah.
depending on how fast they're moving,
It-
you would be past each other, and they would never even find each
That's
other.
right,
They
yeah.
would never have any overlap.
Yep, that's right. It's not always your frame rate. You have the option on Real to use a fixed frame rate for physics. So,
Got it. Okay, great.
but that's still something you
Yeah.
select. So that defines your speed of your
Right.
maximum possible speed
Yep.
of interpenetration for objects. And so this kind of works around. It's obviously a little more expensive if you turn it on, but you can use it selectively. Cool.
Cool.
Next one, I'm gonna go through this kind of quickly because it's really big in scope, and in the release notes we'll have a lot more information on it. But basically, we took what's currently called the Persona editor, and we just split the whole thing into pieces. We really did. Before it was like this one-stop shop.
So it was a Persona, and now it's like an Arma. And like a
Arm a leg and a tail.
All right.
Yeah. That was a bad joke.
Yeah, it's terrible. I'm a father now, so
Oh yeah, right.
yeah,
Dad joke.
I keep them in my pockets.
So we split them up. So we have separate editors for animation and physics and skeleton and skeletal mesh, and so they're all split up into different pieces. I forgot. I should put labels on this. There's labels in the release notes version. I have an old picture. But the cool thing here is that we didn't just split them up. We wanted to make sure we retained what was good about having the one combined thing. So like in the top right, you can still switch between the different counterparts, like the animation blueprint, animation, mesh, and skeleton, and it'll just kind of pop open the asset in a tab, and you can just kind of hop back and forth with that workflow if you need to. But having them all in separate tabs is nice because you can multitask a little better, and also we're able to kind of give every sub-editor kind of its kind of special treatment to make sure that
Yeah.
it's kind of optimized, and we've been working on that. So the next release has quite a few usability improvements. I'm not going to outline them all, but there's pictures of some of them here, just to make things just more streamlined for every workflow. So lots of little usability improvements. We have like animation scenes now, so you can have your beautiful scene behind it, like we did for Static Mesh Editor. You can put in custom meshes. The way that I'll have on the next slide, like the way that animation
love this.
editor works is way easier now. So previewing morph target weights.
Yeah, watching the weights change is
Yeah,
awesome.
I know, it's nice, right?
I mean, it's super awesome for debugging, right? Like, because you can actually see that and understand exactly what's happening over time, as opposed to having to do some guesswork and just change and bang around, right?
Yep, and it's actually, the cool thing here is on the skeleton now. Before it was kind of like a value per animation, and now it's like right on the skeleton. It's just more usable overall. Cool.
I love that picture. So
Let's
good.
see. This
Yes, Victor, morph targets are OP.
This one I'll just mention real quickly. So this is kind of a cool feature that even though the animation here isn't very good, but what it's showing here is that you can just drop a character in the world and they have kind of their springy bits working. So you can see there's a secondary animation on Feng Mao here. He's from Paragon, where his clothing's activated and his kind of weapon tail is activated. So he's just dropping him in the level and hitting simulate to turn that on. Before this sort of required extra steps. And one nice thing here is that rather than constantly having to take your dynamics controllers in IK and having to reassign those or duplicate them for every use case of it, it's now kind of just, you can optionally just set that as part of the skeleton with the default post-process anim blueprint. And after all of your component-specific anim blueprint logic is applied, this one will go and apply on top of that. So if you have stuff that doesn't really interfere with anything, it's just like, this just goes with this skeleton no matter what. You can just assign it to it. Now, everywhere you place the character or see the character happening or doing something, simulating, that blueprint's just going to be there for you.
Yeah.
So it's just we think it'll be a big workflow improvement compared to how that worked before. If you're using any kind of secondary stuff,
On
any
characters.
kind of IK,
Yeah.
should be good. Cool.
Cool.
Next one, this is a VR editor one. Yay. 4.14 has, I mentioned this on the stream before last week, 2 weeks ago rather. So we have some new VR editor features coming. One of them is just support for painting landscape in VR. So you can now bring up the normal landscape editing tool. You can use your laser pointers to kind of paint and erase. You can use most of the regular landscape editing UI with this. There's some exceptions, but we'll be working on those in the future.
Yeah,
But
it's really cool to see all the tools show up here, right? Like over time, I know you and I and Lauren have talked about some of the just kind of the UI challenges. Like, how do you make something we've been doing like this for so long feel good here, right?
Yes.
Like, and this is one for me that's been really great because you actually have that level of depth. every time I work with landscape specifically, I always have to find the right angle for me to pull to kind of really understand what's going on. Whereas with this, you can kind of get in the space
Yeah.
and kind of craft it around you, which I think is super nice.
Actually, like that's a really good point. One of the cool things about working in VR is the scale, the ability to scale the world up and down really easily with one-to-one stroke. So you can make yourself, you can make the level the size of a little train set,
Yeah.
and make your sweeping changes, and then drill down and make like your fine detail
Yeah.
changes, without having to kind of. It's just much less clunky than in the normal editor, and you have like more direct manipulation of. I mean, once you get used to the controls in VR editor and
Yeah.
aiming, but it's your hand, right? So it's like a paintbrush.
Do you have like all the different brush effects for this as well too? Like in there, is it
Yeah.
great?
Yep, you can
Awesome.
you can just on the UI. I know it's not shown well in this GIF. We're doing a better one for the release notes, but you can just click on whatever brush you want. Most of the default tools that have any tool that has like a hold down this button to do something,
Yeah.
or hold this and to erase something,
Yeah.
will work with this. And some of the other tools aren't supported yet in VR, but we'll do them later.
Cool.
Cool. Next one. Vulkan is actually ready to use now. It's been
Woo!
experimental for a little while, but on Android, this is you should be able to ship your games in 4.14
Yep.
on Vulkan.
Yeah, we've seen a couple, so that's awesome.
So I think Android 7 devices and the Galaxy S7 are support it out of the box, and it automatically falls back to GLES 3 or 2, 3, if the hardware can't support it. So that should just be ready.
That's great.
Oh, next one is kind of just a little fun one. I made this on a weekend. I just wanted to show it because, I don't know, people liked it. But basically, there's a new plugin. It's turned off by default. You turn on in plugins UI that turns on MIDI support. And it's just MIDI input, but it's pretty fun and super easy to use. Maybe the screenshot here is kind of hard to see, but it's really simple. You basically just enumerate MIDI devices. It will tell you all about like what the device is capable of. And for anyone who doesn't know, a MIDI device is basically like a musical instrument. That's usually what
Yeah.
it's used for. It's like a sequencing tool
Yep.
or a keyboard.
Yeah, musicians will use it, MIDI as an interface to sync up things like BPM and things like that across multiple pieces of electronics, right? Like, and it can do a number of logical shifting and things like that. It's an older technology. It's been around forever. it
It's old,
seems,
but it's
right?
still going. Yep,
Yeah.
it's still going.
So if you want to do like this and get your little sequence pad up here and control things in your game,
It's fun,
you
yeah.
can do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Tons of MIDI devices out there.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Probably
definitely.
hundreds of thousands, I'm sure.
In the past, this actually kind of, we had a feature called Live Editor. I actually deleted it in 4.14 because it was just in a state of disrepair. It was an experimental feature that we decided that we should just cut, so I deleted it. But this kind of replaces what it did, at least the most basic things that it did, which is, hey, I have a device plugged in, and I'd really like to know about when people touch the device or turn a dial or the velocity of a key when it's hit, and this thing gets you all that, and it's really simple. So
It's great.
have fun. Vehicles. So we made some changes to our vehicle examples. So previously we had like a wheeled vehicle component, I believe it was. The main difference being now, like the center of mass is computed per tire. So you can see in the pictures, the left one looks a little weird in that the car doesn't really tilt at all as it's like swerving. In the right one, we have torque applied to the center of mass of every tire individually. So as it's swerving, the whole thing kind of, it just looks a little more real.
Yeah. It feels like it's like kind of hinting into them, right? as
Yep.
opposed to-
So I'll also mention too, so that's just changes to vehicles and tires, but we also have a new great, really cool example I was looking at today called simple wheeled vehicle movement component. So you can plop on your actor and then kind of assign tires and tire meshes to them and a bunch of attributes and build up a car really quickly. The nice thing about this example component is that it kind of gets rid of more of the complexities of like our previous advanced vehicle thing had like drivetrain and an engine and like all this. It was
Right.
pretty like hardcore to kind of tweak out. And if you just want to make like just get a Jeep driving on your terrain, this would be much easier. And I feel like has settings that are way more fun that like I could understand pretty easily, not being a physics programmer. So it's called Simple Wheeled Vehicle Movement Component. So take a look at that. I think it'll be pretty fun to add vehicles with. Next, okay, I'm getting close to the end here. I don't know how we're doing for time.
I think we're all right. Shelly, you good?
We're okay for now.
Okay,
Woo!
we're getting close to the end on 4.14 stuff.
We only have like 1,700 questions. No, it's not so
I
bad.
did want a little bit of time to talk about kind of future stuff because I always try to sneak in like some more roadmappy.
Yeah.
It's just fun. Okay, so a few more. The GPU profiler. So we have a new thing. To access it, you can get to it in the editor viewport toolbar. There's like stat GPU under the stats window. It's kind of like buried. We'll work on that later. Or you can just type stat GPU in the console. But so what this gives you is what is slow on the graphics card right now, right away. Which is something that previously had a command called profile GPU that would do that, but it pops up this thing. It's fairly complex. You can still use that. This gives you like the live thing. Profile GPU gave you a snapshot. This gives you a live view that's kind of like this. There's no hierarchy or anything. It's just like a flat list of like, hey, here's what all the shadows are costing you in this frame or whatever.
Great.
So it gives you so it's great because you can just keep it up and you can tweak things. You can change scalability settings. You can drop things in. You can measure the effect.
See what it actually
yeah.
does. Where your budget's being spent for VR developers. This is probably just huge.
I
right?
think it is huge.
Yeah.
And if you do need to track it over time, you can use the existing stat system. The command on the consoles. I have it in the slide here, but stat start file, and then type stat GPU. This stuff will all get captured, and then you can load it up in the profiler that's under the window launcher front end window, or you can use Unreal front end, which is a separate tool to view that stuff. But anyways, it makes a file on your drive that you can just load up in either of these two ways, and then kind of you can scrub through stats. You can show and hide and filter things. It gives you the more exhaustive list over time. So all this data will be available there too.
Or your deep dive, right?
The deep dive, yeah. It's pretty powerful. You can even do this remotely. You can send stats across the net and stuff. It's the more fancy way. Okay, next one. This is a cool one. Yay! We added a forward shading renderer in 4.14. I mean, we designed this for use with VR games predominantly and Robo Recall, which I think we saw significant performance savings. I think 25% or 21% or something.
22 just right.
Okay, yeah, just right off.
Yeah.
And like we immediately used that performance to turn on MSAA, which to make the game like super sharp. But it's awesome. That's a great trade-off to be able to make, right? So this feature, you have a new there'll be a lot of information. There's some on the forums already that I saw Epic Shaders or Daniel linked to this morning or yesterday. But there'll be a lot more information to come. But basically, like you can use it in any project. We designed it with Robo Recall in mind for now. We'll make improvements as needed to it. The way that it works is it's forward renderer. It takes all your lights and your reflection captures. It kind of culls them to the frustum, like a grid of cells in frustum space. And then we kind of go for every pixel and iterate over all the lights and reflection captures that are affecting that pixel. Go through them and update the material shading, and then apply the pixel. Shadows are still supported from stationary stuff. They're all computed before we go and do the culling, kind of like normal, and then they're jammed inside the screen space mask so that when we're going through per pixel, we can just be like, oh, cool, here's where I put the shadows. So that's like how that works. So yeah, it's around 20-something. This is just in our Robo Recall test case.
Yeah.
Your results may vary. I know some of the reason that we get such savings, this doesn't mean the forward shading is the way to go and the deferred renderers don't use it. It doesn't all mean that. It's trade-offs. They're both actually very comparable in performance. Forward shading allows you to use MSAA in an elegant way. The deferred render is actually very, very fast still, but you don't have as much control over what you turn off, especially per object or per light. It's kind of, sometimes it's all or nothing with the G-buffer. So the forward render actually gives you a little more power per object or material to kind of like, hey, I don't need the highest resolution reflection captures for all these objects. I'll just turn those off and you get those savings. Yeah. And that's one of the ways that we were able to get like quite a bit of performance savings out of Recall recently.
Yeah, and chatting with Nick, we've been at all these VR events and stuff. Him and I have been talking quite a bit about this, and it's not going to be like the silver bullet thing that's just going to make everything perfect, right? But at the same time, you are going to be able to have a little bit more control over things. You're going to see, depending on the content you're creating, you're going to be able to see those kinds of gains too. And there are plenty of VR applications that the deferred will be the path that you want, because you're going to want those things with a constrained like platform that is VR. Double rendered, 90 frames a second. Everything is going to come down to a trade-off, and so your content might actually want you to go deferred, but we think this is going to be a pretty amazing option for a lot of devs out there.
For us, the team just decided that the sharpness of MSAA, that was really cool for Robo Recall and how the game is played. TSAA, or Templar AA rather, it can have some artifacts because the camera's moving pretty much all the time in VR. So it's definitely a trade-off, but now it's an option that you have, and then your toolbox, you can decide whatever you want to use, and you have more controls. Again, there'll be more information later. I don't know if I have it in the slide. No, I don't. But one thing I did want to mention, there's limitations, of course. Things that work, I have just a quick list. Static and dynamic non-moving lights with shadows work fine. You can have multiple reflection captures, planar reflections, debuffer, decal, skylights, capsule shadows, instant stereo still works. So everything we use in Robo Recall obviously works. But some stuff doesn't work yet. Screen space reflections, SSAO, the new contact shadow feature, which I'm just about to talk about. Moving lights, lights that move that also have shadows aren't supported yet. Dynamic shadow translucency, light functions and IES profiles aren't supported yet. Alpha to coverage, and then finally, there's no MSAA on certain features that are drawn with the forward renderer. The debuffer decals, motion blur, and the dynamic shadows themselves, including capsule shadows, don't have MSAA applied. So just some limitations to be aware of. Some of these might be addressed in the future. Daniel's going to know more. You can bug him about it.
I'm sure we're going to be talking about this one for quite some time.
There is one cool feature, a bonus feature that I think we need to make sure we showcase in the release notes. But there's a new surface forward shading model on materials now that you can choose, and this gives you a new feature that we haven't had, which on translucent materials you can get specular, proper specular and reflections from multiple lights on translucency, which was just something that everyone's asked for a while. So this is where we borrow the forward renderer even in the deferred way. Even with deferred, we can use this feature selectively to get specular on translucency. So that's pretty awesome. Cool. Okay, I think this is the last one. Contact shadows. I talked about this a long time ago, but it was experimental back then and wasn't really. They're like, don't advertise this, it's not done. So I kept nagging them, and apparently it's finally ready to use. So
someone over here in this is just doing this.
They made the GIF like that, conveniently. Okay, so contact shadows. It's kind of it assists with regular kind of cascaded shadows or whatever. Usually with cascaded shadows, you've had to choose a resolution that, at the contact point, at the point where you have fine grained detail or parallax occlusion map, there's just not enough resolution to actually do anything, and you don't see the shadow at that point. You just see like the broad self-shadowing. So contact shadows fills in that gap, that kind of shadow bias gap, by kind of tracing a ray towards the light source.
You can really see on the front teeth right down there, right?
Yeah.
Where there's those scooped areas.
Yeah, or the ponytail. Yeah, just the fine grained shadows. And I have another picture too. This is a Paragon that they let me use, and this is enabled in Paragon now. You can see like that's just those leaves. It's just a bunch of cards actually. There's just textures with some pixel depth offset applied to them, and it ends up with pixel depth offset. It's kind of like parallax occlusion mapping. You can get like these multi-tiered shadows, just super easy with just contact shadows. So it's nice. It's pretty fast. It does have one setting. I don't know if I have it here, the picture of it. I don't. But there's a setting on your light where you can change the contact shadow length, and the length is between 0 and 1, where it's kind of a percentage of the size of the screen. So you usually want to keep that pretty small, like 0.1 or something. Obviously, if you make it big, you'll get bigger shadows, and it will fill more of the gap, but the performance will suffer, and the resolution will lower too. So
it might not look as good too, right? Like you probably want to do that to taste.
Yep. So the default is usually pretty good. Cool. Okay.
Cool.
The next slide is just kind of, I had another picture. Cool. Oh, there's the property. So there you can see the setting, and this is using it with parallax occlusion mapping. Where someone's made a material. This is just a flat quad that someone's done a parallax occlusion map.
Freaking awesome.
I know, it's crazy. This is a flat quad. And they have a palm texture on it, or palm material, and they're outputting pixel depth offset, which the contact shadow stuff uses, and can just, here you go, shadow. It's pretty crazy.
That is awesome.
Yep. All right. I'm going to actually skip this one, because it's just basically like, okay, there might be like one or two things I want to mention, but this is other stuff. I just ran out of time making slides, but there's so much awesome stuff here. I don't want to discredit the team members who work so hard on this crazy stuff. So one highlight here I'll mention is the event-driven loader. We have an experimental new loading system that literally can double your load times in your runtime game, like twice as fast, or actually, no, it's 50% times faster, I think is what we're seeing right now. So 50% times faster by turning it on. And it kind of changes how things are cooked. It's a big, big change that we've been working on for some time, that we're just starting to roll out in our games, and we invite you to try it on, or try it out. It's a new project setting that you can turn on for your project. It might just get you magically faster load times in your game, or it might have problems. Let us know. We're going to keep working on it and make it solid. It's only used at runtime. It's not used in the editor, so you have to test with your cooked kind of packaged product. but we wanted to work in the editor at some point too, and ultimately replace the old loading system. Let's see if there's anything else here worth mentioning. I guess if there's any questions about any of these, I can answer them in the Q&A part, and I'm just going to skip through them because there's just so much. I could just talk forever, and I want to make sure I had just a few minutes to talk about kind of like a few future things that aren't in 4.14, but I think will be fun to talk about.
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
Okay. So one little thing first before I go into it is I want to mention we have, I'm done with slides too, by the way, Shelley. Fire! So most of the stuff is on our roadmap, actually. We update the roadmap regularly. If you go to the UE4 website, it's under community roadmap. And a lot of this stuff, even this future stuff I'm talking about, there's at least the hint of all these things on there pretty much. So you can usually find things there, and definitely go check that out regularly if you want to see what's coming, because we have at least 2 or 3 months ahead of time.
Yeah, usually it's updated once a month, and there's usually around 3 months of content.
3 months of content
up there. Yep.
Yep.
That's kind of the norm. That's what we aim for, right?
Things change all the time here.
Totally.
But it's the best we do the best we can to keep that updated so people know.
From you.
Oh my god. Okay, so a few cool things. So we announced that Nintendo Switch support is coming. That's obviously still being worked on, but we'll come to a feature release. I'm super excited about that. I want to mention Blueprints compiled to C++. So we've had this feature for a little while in experimental state called Blueprint nativization in your project settings, which basically meant to the engine and the editor, take all my blueprints and compile them down to C++ code and use them that way in your runtime game. And then that's pretty much what it does. So in the next, I think this is, the Blueprint team said, next release has a good chance of this being final. But it's already in a good state. Every release that gets improved in 4.14, I think has pretty much what we're using in Robo Recall has this turned on by default, and I think it's what we're using in that game. I think they just want to polish it up. They want to add like support for selectively enabling it per blueprint, some things like that. But anyways, please try it out and give feedback. We think it's close to being pretty awesome.
Mike Beach will be happy to hear about it.
Some other stuff going on. So the Vulkan desktop support, we're working hard to get that at SM4 parity, like Shader Model 4 parity. It's still been a big work in progress. But there's tons of work happening on it every release. So it's getting better every release. But just know that we're working on the Vulkan stuff, and it's getting close to catching up with the D3D renderer. The new texture streaming system is coming online soon. I think also maybe next release we'll be ready to kind of like announce all the cool stuff with it. But you kind of just automatically get these advantages. In fact, like even over the past 2 releases, including this one, there's just constant improvements to it, and they're on by default. So you've kind of just been getting them. But we'll be ready to talk more about kind of all the things we changed and the benefits, hopefully next release.
Cool.
Another thing that's in progress right now that I've been wanting this for so long is dynamic content hot reload. So this is the idea where you can just keep the editor open, right? And you can get new versions of things from your team members, and I'll have to kind of like shut down and like, oh god, that file's locked, even though someone just made this new blueprint that I want. You can kind of keep the editor open and take these new versions of files, and they'll update.
From the editor.
Yep, and they'll update kind of automatically. That's kind of a really cool feature that's in progress right now that hopefully will improve collaboration. At least that's what I think. Async loading. Okay, so we've had this feature for a few releases called async loading thread that you can enable in project settings. We're working to try to get that enabled by default. You can always try it for your game, but the reason we haven't enabled it by default is because it takes a little bit of discipline for that to work properly, namely that your UObject constructors and your serialization functions need to be written in a thread-safe way in C++. Your blueprints will be fine, but anything you've written in C++, like a constructor or a serialization function, they need to kind of not do anything sketchy with static variables or dereferencing things that are used in a different thread. We can't guarantee that everyone using Unreal has written their stuff that way because we hadn't told them to do it that way. So we've been looking into a way to kind of softly turn this on by default. For perhaps new projects get it on by default. We have a lot of clear documentation about how to use it. Old projects, we keep it off by default, but you can always flip it on like you can right now. But anyways, that's coming, and you're going to see, again, like nice load time benefits from that. It basically solves a problem where right now, as we're loading, we're ping-ponging back and forth between a worker thread and the game thread, kind of like, oh, I unpacked all this stuff. What do you want to do with it? Let's serialize it. And then like, oh, I found some other stuff. Let's go back to the worker thread and see if they want to load it. Does that, comes back to the game thread. Let's serialize it. You know, it's just back and forth depending on the depth complexity of your object. So this kind of solves that work and kind of just let the worker thread just go crazy and then just come back when you got all this crap done. So it's going to get you some automatic performance. And you can turn it on now in your project and try it out as long as you feel like your constructors, generally your constructors are probably fine. Usually you're not doing a whole lot of threading stuff in them, but you never know.
Cool.
Okay, a few more things. Sequencer is getting a bunch of improvements. There's actually a bunch of sequencer improvements I didn't mention in 4.14 that were on the slide deck there, but they'll be in the release notes. We're working on blending support for skeletal meshes. I don't know if this will be in 4.15 or 4.16, but basically a nice way that you can just kind of stack skeletal mesh tracks on the sequencer timeline and control how they blend together really easily without having to like kind of go off and somewhere else and make like a nice blend transition. And then we're also adding video tracks to sequencer where you can just kind of just drag and drop media from the media editor and plop it right on a track and then kind of scrub video, whether it's like a previs storyboard or whatever. And I think audio too from the video and kind of have that. I think the team wants to get support for like image planes too, which I'm not super familiar with, but basically a place to put this stuff in 3D rather than just like kind of like a background screen. So that's another thing that's kind of going on. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but the VR team is working on mixed reality movie generation. I don't know much about the approach they're using actually, but I know it's going to be in flight the next few weeks or next month or so.
Yeah, I talked to Nick quite a bit about it. There are a lot of ideas, and they're all good. We're just trying to look at what the best one is.
Okay.
Right? So,
But I know we get asked about that all the time, and I know we want to support it as well.
Totally,
I'd love to show off VR editor that way. I think that'd be awesome. So, so yeah, that stuff's coming. And then in VR editor, I mentioned these on 2 weeks ago, but some stuff coming soon is a brand new kind of UI and a framework for UI that's more extensible. We'll have sequencer. We're going to try and get sequencer up and running in UI in a limited setup. And then simulate mode so that you can quickly turn on physics and turn off physics without leaving VR. So those things will be hopefully coming soon as well. All right.
Cool.
That's kind of like the short-term-ish kind of stuff. The more long-term-ish stuff, like, I mean, I'll leave for now.
Unreal 5.
Yes. I'll leave for now. But again, like a lot of this stuff is on the roadmap. It's just some things, you know, if they're not in the next 2 months and it's just an idea, or if it's just something we barely started, you never know when they're actually going to land, or if they'll land, because again, we can pivot pretty quick.
Or there might be things that just crop up, but then we just kind of do, right? Like
there's just stuff. Oh, there's always stuff. Like you know, like mergeable assets is one that we're looking at doing. We haven't started this yet. We've talked about it a little bit before, and that we'd love to do it. But just basically text-based format for assets, selective text-based format for maybe levels or materials, things that are just basically buckets of properties would be really good for this. It's something that the core team is going to be, they're scheduled to look at later this month or next month.
Scheduled to look at.
And well, I mean, we're going to have design meetings, you know, they're normal thing, right?
Oh, I know.
This is the transparency thing. We're going to start streaming these design meetings. That'll be fun.
Totally. It's just, it's my favorite thing too. It's like, you know, it's like, okay, we know we need to do this thing. It's like, but once there's actually a meeting in the book that says, all right, we need to at least look at it, right? Like, you know, it's like, all right, there are tracks being laid, right?
Cool.
Cool. We got a number of questions. Shelly, how are we doing?
You have until 3:30.
Woo! Great. We can make that work. All right. So let's just hop through here. LOD generation. Does that work at runtime? Or is it something you want to do beforehand?
I don't know if the code's available at runtime, but it's an editor tool feature right now. If you're programmatically generating content, I can see why you might want to use it, but it's not like it takes time to generate the LOD, right? It's not like instant. It's fast. Don't get me wrong. Like I think it's implemented really quickly, but
it's not something you like, you know, create a new mesh and then apply this thing to it while the player's still trying to walk towards it, right?
You might be able to do it. Like I mean, it's probably a little bit of work. I doubt we've focused on that aspect of it. Right now, it's designed to be an offline thing.
Cool. So for the static light scenarios, since those are like U assets, is there any way to or plan to be able to interpolate between them two? For instance, like imagine if you had you know, if you're actually trying to do a day-night cycle and you actually bake like 7 or 8 of them
I
in there,
know.
right? You wanted to kind of blend.
I think like knowing the way that that stuff is stored in the render, I think it would be fairly difficult to implement that in Unreal right now. I mean, you could always do the cheese ball one, right, where you freeze the post process, blend the post process in, and it's just like
Yeah.
the character can't move during it or something. But
Yeah.
I've seen that done before.
Yeah.
But no, there's no. You can imagine how. I mean, first you're sucking up the light map overhead of all the stuff and keeping both sets in memory.
Yeah.
Where really right now you have explicit control, right? Like you're streaming in the new set, you can evict the old set. Your high watermark might still be might be high, but at least you wouldn't have to keep it in memory.
For
Like
too-
after you
too
make the
long,
switch,
right?
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. But no, it's an interesting feature request.
Yeah. I saw in the updated status the audio rewrite, any upcoming audio changes. I actually talked to Aaron earlier today about some things. He's still working on it. There's a number of things that he wants to get into it and stuff. So I don't know that we'll see anything in 4.14, but potentially then in you know follow-up releases after that. So
I mean, the changes he's working on are going into the builds, so it's steadily improving. It's just not on. It's not turned on. And it's not recommended to use it, and we haven't documented it yet.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of steadily
Yes.
improving. It's like we have a number of things like Niagara's in that same boat. Big improvements every release to it. We're not telling you guys about it because it's not ready to use yet. We don't use it
Yeah.
yet. We're still testing it, and it's still has months of work ahead of it.
yeah,
Um,
and that should be telling because we'll often say, hey, this is ready in an experimental, and it still has a bit
Yeah,
of lacking
it's-
stuff. So
They're not even experimental
even
yet.
there yet,
Yeah,
yeah.
don't use it yet. Don't use it until we try it.
yeah, but it is actively being worked on and stuff.
Yep.
And I had a question about Niagara as well too. Like yeah, it's the same kind
Every
of thing,
week
right?
I'm in meetings about it, and we're kind of massaging the design there. It's improving super fast. It's looking great.
Cool. Create static mesh from actors. Does that work with instance? Sorry, create
Oh.
static mesh from actors. Does that work with instance actors as well?
Good question. I don't know actually that one. I'm not
Hmm.
sure. Try it out.
Yeah, just
I'm
bang
not
around
sure if
with
they've
it,
done
yeah.
that.
Static mesh generation, can that be used at runtime? I wouldn't,
Static mesh generation.
to be able to like, how you took the
Oh,
skeletal
group things
set-
together?
Yeah,
I'm guessing not. It's probably editor code.
Yeah.
The way that it was authored, knowing what but
it's kind of what it looks like. I'm trying to think of how that would work.
I mean, we get questions like this quite a bit lately, where more people are trying to do more programmatic stuff at runtime.
Yeah,
Like I was just on a support thread recently about, hey, I just want to save a static mesh out after I've made it in memory. I just want to save it. I want to cache it, right?
yeah,
Or modified something. I just want to cache it so I can load it up at runtime. But the saving code for static mesh has enough editor bits in it that can't really be used at runtime without hacking up the engine. This is something that when we do new stuff now, I'm being very cautious to make sure that everything is runtime enabled for editing. Big new features like that I think there'd be value in, because I'm a big fan of doing things programmatically in game.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it. So there's just legacy systems that I don't think are really cut out for that right now. But it's important to me. So if we can get back in there and switch some things up to make it easier to do those things, then I would like that. But I'm not exactly sure for this one.
yeah,
This one seems very tool side, because it's
Yeah.
very much like select these objects and do this
Right.
thing with them.
yeah. You actually, you have an interface to actually do that thing, right? Like
Yeah.
I've got a mouse that I'm going to drag over these specific assets, show them in a list, and say, okay, run these.
Yeah, but
commands
at the
to
same time, I
find
can
them.
see how the core of it, what it's doing. I
Yeah,
mean, no reason
yeah,
why
that's true,
it couldn't
yeah.
work.
Cool. The Ansel plugin, do you know how it's actually used, or is it like once it's enabled, like is there an API for it? Do you access it in code, or?
I don't know the details of the API. I just know that there's new settings on the camera manager class
Okay.
where you can configure Ansel specific things. I don't know if there's probably some blueprint functions too. I haven't seen them myself yet, or haven't been able to try it.
Gotcha.
But
it should be in the preview though, yeah. So if people want to check it out,
It's already in the
plug
preview.
grab it.
Yep.
Cool. Can you stretch a cable component at this point? Or they kind of set it since there's like 2 transforms and a cable between them, right?
I think you can stretch them out. You might have to adjust the segment count yourself while
Yeah.
you do it or something like that. I don't know if there's an auto segment count based off, but you can move those control points wherever.
Yeah. No, yeah.
But it just might get very coarse.
yeah.
I don't think there's an automatic segment count.
Cool.
But it'd be super easy to do that.
So it's a little bit of work. On vector noise, are those textures baked before packaging, or do you bake them and then on event begin play? Like, is that all that information happen beforehand
It all happens
in the editor?
in the editor,
Okay.
and then what the artists will do here is they'll use the draw material to render target blueprint node, and make this code would never run in game in these cases. They'd set this up in some random level script that wouldn't end up in the game, and then they'd run it. It would generate a material, and they'd use that, and they'd save it out to a texture.
Got it.
In the editor.
Because it's so expensive, right? Like some of that math is just
Yeah,
you would yeah.
If they don't need to run that stuff at runtime, like we wouldn't run it at run. So that's all it is.
Yeah.
If they don't need it to animate or be programmatic based off some factor in the game, then we bake everything, right? We bake like crazy to make our games fast. So that's kind of it.
New compression methods for textures. Anything like foreseeable future type work?
Nothing I'm aware of other than platform-specific shenanigans
Yeah.
For upcoming platforms or whatever. But
It really comes down to
so.
the renderer and the platform itself, right? Like
Yeah.
what they support,
Mhm.
and we'll follow suit there.
and we're generally like DXT all the way on.
Yeah.
In the
Support for vehicles with more than 4 wheels. Like, would the changes now for that four-wheel vehicle work for like an 18-wheeler?
Yeah, I was looking at it today, and it just has an array of wheels, so it didn't say like 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, like make as many as you want.
Cool.
I don't know. I don't think there's any assumptions in
Love
there
it.
about that.
MIDI controller. Is that available like in the editor, not just for playing games? Like, could you actually use it for Unreal Editor to actually make changes?
Oh, I got asked this before already. Not quite yet, but this is something that is near and dear to my heart too. And I was just talking.
Can you imagine a color wheel? Like you have a touchpad that you can actually just choose?
So the feature I deleted called Live Editor was designed for that.
Oh, okay.
But it was designed before we had Bluetilities, and it's really, really old, and had rotted. It didn't work. I deleted it. But it actually was designed for you to have like like a slider on your desk that you could slide a property with. But it was a bad implementation. So this would be the right way to do it, but we need kind of a better plugin system for blueprints before we do this. You could, if you're writing a C++ plugin, you could use the media device plugin and drive anything in the editor you want it with it. If you're willing to write a plugin to do that, I'd like blueprints to be able to do that as well. And I was just chatting with Mike Nolan about this yesterday, about kind of the path to get there. Hopefully over the next few months. So blueprints, or it's called Bluetilities right now, but it's kind of like a preview of what this would be. But proper support for blueprint-based plugins, so that I can create a plugin that only has blueprint content in it, and I can kind of register myself as a modular feature of the editor or runtime in the normal way that a C++ plugin would, and get access to more of the editor constructs right from Blueprint and do things like this with them. Where right now some of that stuff is kind of off limits for different reasons. But yeah, that's a big goal of mine over the next while, is to get a lot more editor functionality exposed to scripting.
Cool. I've got a, hey Chance, how do you grow hair like that? Please help.
I know he's quite different than before, isn't he?
Yeah, I know, it's funny. We were talking about this morning. I haven't been on since like May. I didn't have a beard. My hair was a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And, yeah, you just stop cutting it.
Before he had a hat, and now he has a hat-sized hair.
I know, I wear the orange beanie, but now my head stays warm enough, so I'm not too worried about it. Let's see. So accessing variables from the vehicle component, modify them. Is that are those exposed? Like, can we grab those at real time?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's all U properties.
So basically, if you had one that you could actually flatten a tire, or say, oh, this wheel no longer has.
Yeah.
Like you can flatten a tire with.
Change the characteristics of the tire.
Yeah.
Yes, you should be able to, no
Cool.
problem.
Oh, that's actually the question. I was just that was such a, like, for example, change the physics when it goes flat. Yeah. A little bit off topic, but you might know. Flipbooks, will they use UMG someday, or is there going to be any crossover there?
I haven't heard that brought up on the team, but yeah, I'm not the best person to ask about that one. I can see the value for sure, though.
Gotcha. And I wanted to say, since we started Q&A, if you've been asking more questions in the chat, I'm sorry, we probably won't be able to get to them. We've got a couple more here, and then we got to wrap. But if you want to drop those into the forum thread, we'll try to follow up with you guys after the fact.
Yeah, I always read the forum thread after the chat,
Yeah.
and I'll respond to whatever I can.
So we got a couple more here. Contact shadows. Do you know if they'd be friendly in a VR environment? Since they're baked, or no, those are baked. Sorry, contact shadows.
They're not baked. They're just the dynamic shadows that go per pixel to kind of make it fill in that.
I was
that
thinking
bias
of
distance.
I was thinking of the instance shadows, but
Oh,
contact shadows.
You can use them in VR, but they don't work with the new forward renderer.
Okay.
So if you're using the deferred renderer, there's no reason they wouldn't work in VR, and I don't think they're prohibitively slow or anything.
Yeah.
They cost something, but you can turn them off with just setting that shadow contact length to 0. It might be 0 by default. I'm not sure what the default is, but if it's set to default for your light, set to 0 for your light by default, then you won't see any. And it's probably like that just so that
Got it.
everything works the same way.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can turn it on. Turn on the new GPU profiler.
Yeah.
Switch
Check
to
it out,
VR.
see how expensive
Point
it
one.
is.
Just toggle it off and on and see how it goes. But
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work.
Cool. And then somebody wants to use parallax occlusion mapping with contact shadows for a wall material of a huge structure. You think that would be an expensive thing?
No, I mean, we use parallax occlusion mapping on our stuff. You pay like a pretty high pixel per pixel cost with it, right? So
Yeah.
you balance how big it's going to be on screen with what your use case is. You can put it on a wall. It's just going to be a more expensive wall.
Yeah.
But you could also have material scalability that just turns it off and just becomes a normal wall after some distance or whatever.
Yeah, and anything too, like how expensive depends on so many other things too, right? Like
Yep.
as far as what you're running on, what your target platform is, and
And I think
like everything trade-offs, right?
Yep, totally. We should have the right scalability settings that you can turn it off if it's a problem on computers that you don't want it on. And I think we have examples of parallax occlusion mapping and content examples, and I know we have some material functions built in that help with it too.
Cool. All right, well, that's all we got. Any other closing thoughts?
No, I don't think I'm
No.
good. Yeah.
Well, download 4.14 Preview 2 this week. Check it out. Don't use it for production because there's still some broken bits in there, we guarantee you. We're potentially looking at another preview before the final release, but I can say with decent confidence that we're aiming before the American Thanksgiving for the full release. So definitely check it out. Shelly, thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming
Shelley.
back and hanging with us. Mike, thanks for chatting
Of course.
and giving us all the information. Everybody in the audience, thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something about 4.14 and you're as excited as we are about it. We will see you next Tuesday for training and next Thursday for the regular whatever we talk about.
Good planning.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.